More on this, Michael Arnold is a researcher at TRT World's own research centre and joins me now in the studio. Thanks so much for coming in. First of all, when we cover the Lebanese protests, something that really stands out is just how peaceful they are. Tell us about these protester tactics. Why?
Sure, I think this is in many ways reflective of how much buy-in there has been from the the average Lebanese to this protest movement, which is something which is different from protest movements we've seen in the past. These ones, so far as we have seen, as they've continued, have really much been across the sectarian and across the socio-economic divide in Lebanon, which is really unprecedented for the country. Just to give an example of how regular people are participating, even those people who can't go down into the street, for example. Every evening now they've started banging pots and pans out their windows. So the soundscape in Beirut in the evening these days, at a certain time, is you hear pots and pans banging throughout the city to give an indication of solidarity with people on the street. As to the tactics, of course, I think what this protest movement has realized is that in order to have any success, they can't just remain in the squares. So hence we've seen blocking of streets. Now we've seen shifting to protests in front of state institutions, including the central bank, of course, including the telecom companies, and now, as you mentioned, in front of judiciary structures as well.
And remind us, what is happening politically right now, behind the scenes, away from those protests? We know Saad Hariri is stepping down.
Yeah, absolutely. So Saad Hariri has stepped down. Currently, he's in the caretaker position, so he's still the caretaker prime minister, and we have a caretaker cabinet. The big issue right now is that there seems to be very little urgency in forming a new government, which, of course, not only are the protest movement demanding, but also Lebanon's primarily Western patrons are also demanding this. Hariri, for his part, is the likely candidate to be the next prime minister, as the prime minister in Lebanon, of course, has to come from within the Sunni Muslim community. There aren't really any other prominent names that can stand out in this position. At the same time, there's several blockages that are preventing this new government from moving forward. Both Hariri and some of his political backers, as well as the international community, have been calling for what they're calling a technocratic government, basically meaning a cabinet without politicians, without people who have those political alliances. That is opposed on one end by Hezbollah, primarily because there is a concern in that camp that having a purely technocratic government will isolate them within the state. And by their allies in the Free Patriotic Movement, which is the party of the current president and of the caretaker foreign minister, who want to ensure that their political voice is also heard at the table.
All right, a lot of negotiations going on there, and as you say, not enough urgency. But could the economic situation push that political coming together? And we heard the governor, central bank governor, speaking. Just how bad is the economy now?
Yeah, I think this is something that's underlying all of this, and this is underlying the impetus for the protest movements, as well as many other problems that the country is facing. By all expert accounts, the country is on the brink of financial collapse. This is due to a number of reasons. Primarily now you have problems servicing the public debt. And now, because you have an increased fear of collapse of the economy as well, you have continued capital flight from the country. So the U.S. dollars aren't there in the country to service the debt. The U.S. dollars aren't there in the country to purchase the imports, that the country so desperately needs. So this is the reason why there's so much pressure right now, both from within the country and without, to actually move things forward with a new government.
And Michael, as we said earlier when we were speaking, all this in a country of, what is it, 5 million people?
Sure, yeah.
Tiny.
There hasn't been a census since the 1920s in Lebanon for political reasons, but yeah, as far as we know, it's a small country, 4 or 5 million people at most.
Incredible. Thanks so much for coming in and speaking to us on the News Hour.
Pleasure.
Thank you.